This week's training, I want to go over children with special needs that are in the daycares that we work at. This is something that I personally feel is very important and needs discussed because these children do have a specific set of extra help that they need. And we want to make sure that we are giving them the love and support that they need while we are with them as well. So jumping into it, I love this phrase. It says that every child, whether they have special needs or not, is an individual and has individual needs. So in this training, we will talk about kids with special needs and the benefits of being in daycare, some of the things that they need extra help with, how we can manage just these kids. But we also will talk about the benefit for your neurotypical children as well. And I personally think that every child, again, whether they have special needs or not, they all have their own personalities, their own likes, their own dislikes. And so if we look at all children the same in the sense of they're all going to need disciplined in different ways, interacted with in different ways, it makes this, I think, a lot less challenging and a lot less scary if you think about the fact that all kids need just that little bit of individuality when it comes to interactions. So before I jump too far into this training, I want to hear from you guys. So who of us have worked with special needs kids before, whether it's whole groups of them or just a few individuals? Who here has worked with them before? Do you not have anybody that's worked with special needs?
Sorry, my Zoom's being weird. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I worked with special needs just for a summer. It was their summer school program, and I was just the EA, and they're fourth graders. So there's only 6 of them because it was just everyone in their grade that came to summer program. But that's the only experience I've had with them, working with them.
That's awesome, though. I think that is awesome.
It was so fun. I loved it.
Yes, they are really fun. I do love working.
So innocent.
Yes. So that was Desiree. Gabrielle also said that she used to teach dance classes to students with special needs. That is really cool. I love that. So for those of you who have worked with these kids before, what has been your favorite part about working with kids with special needs? Brianna also said that she worked with a lot of special needs kids in a pediatric dentistry. That's really cool too. Yeah, so going back to this question, what has been your favorite part, or what's a story that you have that you love when it comes to a interaction that you had with working special needs kids? I can share mine just to help your guys's brain juices flow. So I worked at a daycare where we had a little boy who had autism, and they had placed him in the 2-year-old classroom instead of in the 3- and 4-year-old classroom, which is actually how old he was, mostly because he wasn't potty trained yet, and he wasn't vocal, so he didn't speak when he needed things or wanted things. And he was a pretty challenging kid overall. He was bigger than the other kids, and so he could push them around and all of that good stuff. But I remember this one day, we were sitting in the gym, and he came up to me and like tried to tickle me, and I like just kind of jumped at him, and he laughed and he ran around the room a couple times, and then he came back and he like waited for me to kind of just jump at him again, and he would slowly get closer and closer and closer. And I think that it's so interesting that I didn't have to like get up or anything. He just loved the fact that I gave him just that little bit of attention. And some of the other kids started doing it too, and then he didn't really need to come to me anymore. He was just playing with the other kids. But that's one of my favorite parts, is seeing the way that their brain interacts with play. So the things that they think is so fun, that some of the other kids just wouldn't, they would want you to actually physically tickle them or chase them, play tag, different things. And he just wanted to know that you were going to jump at him. So that was one of my favorite things.
I can go next. So when I taught dance classes, it was just for a short period of time when I was in high school, but I loved the like unity in the classroom. I feel like there was just so much more like one-on-one engagement from like each person in the classroom, that it was so much more exciting and like enthusiastic. So I feel like it just brought like a different level of like unison to the classroom, which I really enjoyed.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I haven't been able to work with like a group of special needs kids before. So that's really cool to hear that like they had dance classes and that there is that unity in that they were able to get that one-on-one attention while still in that like group space, like they were able to have their individuality still. And I don't know, I love kids with special needs. I think they're the cutest. So other stories or interactions that you want to share? Okay. If we think of any others as we're going along, please feel free to interrupt. That's really what I want from these trainings, is to hear a lot from you so that we can learn from each other, and I don't feel like I'm just talking to a screen the whole time. So now that we've talked about some of our favorite things, what are some challenges that you guys have seen when it comes to working with these kids as well?
Are you sorry? Are you specifically talking about special needs? Oh yeah, sorry, that's
Yes.
challenges working with special needs. I just saw that.
Yeah.
I think, like on a personally, patience, like for me, and just being more understanding of what they know and what they don't know, and just that. Yeah, I think patience and just trying to understand and get at their level of what they want or what they're trying to communicate, especially for the ones that are nonverbal or the ones that can't do anything for themselves. So, and it's hard because I know they get frustrated too because they're trying their hardest. And so it's just like, yeah, I feel like that can be some kind of challenge working with them.
Yeah, you touched on a couple different challenges there. I would agree, patience is really hard. It's because you're looking at a kid that might be 5, 6, 7 years old, but has the skill set of a 1, 2-year-old, so that it's harder to recognize that they aren't necessarily at the same functionality of some of these 5 and 6-year-olds. When in our mind, like they look like they should be. And so I agree, like that patience sometimes is really hard, but same with the communication. Like communication is a huge one that these kids really, really struggle with. So those are both really big challenges. So Gabrielle said the enthusiasm is a double-edged sword because it also makes lesson plans less smooth and a little more overstimulating. Yeah. I think there's a couple different parts with this, the lesson plans, the sitting still. They get so excited about different things, or they have a harder time focusing on these things. So I would agree that definitely your lesson plans, your activities throughout the day, they can be harder and more challenging with these special needs kids. Other challenges that you guys have seen?
For me, it was more challenging to work with special needs kids because you don't know their specific personalities and how they react to different things and what can trigger them. So it's kind of just like a guessing game, and you just got to be kind and be patient with them and be slow with them because anything can set them off. And then once they get set off, it's kind of hard to get them back to like settle down and be like, okay, I'm sorry. But
Yeah.
they definitely, yeah, kind of hard to control sometimes.
Yeah. It's that for these kids, because they don't have that communication, and so they can't tell you when they do or don't like things, it is a lot easier for their brain to go into what's called crisis mode. And any kid, any adult, whether they're special needs or neurotypical, when your brain goes into crisis, it is very hard to hear reason. It's very hard to be talked down. It's very hard to get distracted. Like all you can focus on right now is, I'm in this crisis. So you're trying to play that balancing game of trying to push them a little bit so you can see if they really do like something, but they're just not reacting to it as much, or if they really don't like it, without pushing them to that point of going into crisis. So that is definitely a big challenge that I would say is there as well. If you have others, again, feel free to stop me. So this one was already brought up, the communication gaps that are there between the child and others, whether it's the children and other children, they can't communicate with their friends very well, or if it's that child and their parent, the child and other adults like us as caregivers. If they are nonverbal or non-vocal, then there is a difference between verbal and vocal. It is really hard to be able to communicate. So the biggest differences between verbal and vocal, a child is considered a verbal child when they have any sort of communication skills, whether it's vocal communication, ASL, there's touch pads that they've got the words that they can form sentences on. Any of that is considered verbal. Your vocal is the speech. It's coming directly from your voice box. So in daycares where we don't know these specific kids, again, that communication gap, if they are ASL speaking, but we aren't, that can be a really big frustration for everybody involved. Another challenge, some of these kids have medical needs or adjustments. Some of their medical needs could be they're in a wheelchair. Some of them might have walking canes or sticks. Some of them might need medications throughout the day. So all of these things that are challenges, that it's needing the flexibility of making sure that the activities that we're doing can include these special needs kids as well. Another challenge is the mental and physical development gaps. So I have a sister-in-law who has a pretty rare, it's not super rare, they're figuring out that it's more and more common, but it's still decently rare. But it's a syndrome called charge syndrome, and it affects a lot of different areas in your body. And she is 18 years old. She looks like she's 16 years old, and mentally she's probably at like a 10, 11-year-old. And so again, that challenge of they look older than what their brain physically is developed to, that can be a pretty big challenge of working with these kids. This one was also brought up, but that patience of accepting that they typically need that more attention, both emotional and physical. So it's going to take them longer, and they might need that help if we're cleaning up in a classroom. They might need that help during playtime. If you're doing arts and crafts, they're going to need more of that physical one-on-one time. But same with emotional, they're going to get worked up a lot easier And cleaning up, while it might not be fun for the other kids, this could send them into a meltdown. And so it's giving them that attention, so that we're making sure that they are being met with their emotional and physical needs. There's a misunderstanding sometimes of how to interact amongst the children. So what I mean by this one is, with that same little boy that I talked about earlier, the kids that were his same age wanted to play kickball. And so they were kicking the ball to each other, and all that this little boy saw was that the ball was moving across the floor. And so he would pick it up and he would throw it at the other kids. And they didn't understand why he didn't understand that he was supposed to be kicking the ball. And it made these kids really frustrated. It made the little boy really frustrated because they were getting mad at him and yelling at him. And so there is that challenge of trying to explain to these other kids ways that they can interact, so that they aren't getting hurt, because that ball, it probably hurt. Other challenges before I move on. Okay. So possible accommodations. We've talked a lot about the different challenges that can arise. So what are some things that you have done and found successful to accommodate for those challenges? I'll give an example. This might be a little bit of a confusing question. So with these non-vocal kids that do know a little bit of ASL, something that could be an accommodation is learning just basic ASL words so that you can understand when they're asking for more food, or if they're hungry, if they need to go to the bathroom. Being able to speak to them in a language that they would understand is one example of an accommodation that you can make. Okay, so possible accommodations, again, that non-vocal. So the challenge that arises from that is that frustration, again, with not being able to communicate their needs, their wants, just different things like that. So the possible accommodations, if they are ASL speaking, you can learn a little bit of sign language, or you can use picture or words, or yes, no questions, so that they can nod or shake their head. Those are all examples of ways that you could accommodate for a non-vocal child. Another condition that these children typically have is sensory processing disorders, where they get overwhelmed by kids around them. They have a harder time with transitions. They don't like certain foods, the way they taste, the way they smell, the way they feel. So a possible accommodation is providing a quiet space for them to go to. A lot of daycares will have a library section in each room. So making it, like, if needs be, letting them be able to go into the library if no other kids are over there, or having them sit kind of in a corner away from the other kids, and not allowing the other kids to go in that corner, so that they can have that relaxing, calming down time. Another possible accommodation is giving transition warnings, and then also making those transitions fun. So for example, in 5 minutes, we're going to be cleaning up the toys so that we can go outside. And then at that 5-minute mark, you know, saying like, okay, it's time to clean up the toys. They would need that probably one-on-one attention to help with the cleaning up of toys. But then the transition of playing inside to outside, like, okay, should we skip outside? Should we spin to the outside? Like different things that can make it a little bit more fun and not seem so hard in their brain of moving on from one thing to the next thing. It's making it play the whole time. Other possible accommodations before I move on. So this page mostly is just a legality side. So the Americans with Disabilities Act basically states that a child care center and child care providers must make their center an equal opportunity for all children and parents, whether they have special needs or not. And they cannot discriminate against someone with special needs. So child cares and their centers cannot exclude those with special needs unless their presence would pose a threat to the health or safety of others. So if you have a kid that is physically aggressive towards the other kids, that would be a reason that they might not be allowed to be in a daycare. But just because they have a special need does not disclude them from being able to go to a daycare. And then child cares and their centers must make reasonable modifications unless doing so would constitute a fundamental alteration or undue burden. So basically that means that if you have a kid with special needs and they need that like quiet area in a classroom, it's pretty easy to move bookshelves and like different things around to make that space. So that would be a reasonable modification that this center could make. An unreasonable modification would be something like if they don't have any classrooms on the base level, it's all stairs to the classrooms and a child is in a wheelchair. If they don't have an elevator, it's like that child wouldn't be able to get up to the floor where the classrooms are. But putting it in an elevator would shut down the daycare while they did construction. And so that would be seen as a fundamental alteration or an undue burden, because they would also have to be putting forth quite a bit of funds to make that change. Are there any questions with this Americans with Disabilities Act? Okay. So just a few more things and then we'll be done. So there are benefits of inclusive childcare, both for the children with special needs and for the children without. What are some benefits that you guys think there would be for kids with special needs? I'll start talking about the ones that I have seen, and then if you guys, again, feel free to interrupt me. So some benefits for these special needs kids, it gives them a chance to learn by observing and interacting with other children, both on their own skill set or at a higher skill set. And then they're able to take that observations and interacting and apply it into their, again, into their learning. It gives them time and support to build relationships with other children. So when they're in classrooms that are around other kids that are, again, either their age or at their skill set, they can have that practice with building relationships that they might not have if they were just to be at home all the time. Or in just a class where there's only special needs kids, like if everybody has a problem of socially interacting, it's a lot harder for people to reach out. But if you've got kids that are reaching out to those kids, it's a lot easier to build relationships. It gives them a chance to practice social skills. So again, like that, building relationships. They also have that space to practice the social skills. And so they're learning like, okay, that wasn't the best way to handle that interaction. What can we do better next time? They're getting that practice and that skill set. It also gives them exposure to a wide variety of challenging activities. So if they are at a lower skill set than the rest of the class and we're working on something that they might not fully, something that they wouldn't be exposed to because they're not in that skill set. It gives them that exposure to those challenging activities, and it again provides a space where they can practice those. So if they really struggle with puzzles, but their friends really like to play puzzles all the time, like they have that exposure and they can see how it's done and observe how it's done and then try to figure it out themselves as well. And then it also gives them a place to build relationships with caring adults other than their parents. Unfortunately, we live in a society where there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to how to act around kids with special needs. And a lot of times our mindset has moved to the avoiding it instead of asking questions or just being that accepting. I would say that it's definitely more knowledge is coming out about it. And so we are in a moving mindset of moving towards that inclusion and desire to interact with them, even though they're different. But it hasn't always been that way. And so these daycares allow for that space where they're hopefully with caring adults that don't judge them because of their special needs. Benefits for your neurotypical children. There's an increased appreciation and acceptance of individual differences. So again, going back to not ignoring and not excluding, they are able to see these kids, and it gives them a chance and an opportunity to be friends with them and understand how they work and understand that even though they are different, there are things that they can still do. And there's still ways that they can play and have fun. And it helps these kids see them as normal people, even though they have these differences. It also gives them an increased empathy for others. Recognizing that some kids have a harder time doing something than other kids do, that can increase your emotional capacity to care for other people. And then it gives them that preparation for adult life in an inclusive society, to be able to change adult viewpoints on how to interact with kids with special needs or other adults with special needs. It really does need to be introduced at these younger ages. So it gives them that preparation for being adults and being that inclusive society. And then it gives them an opportunity to master activities by practicing and teaching. So going back to the example where I said that the one kid might not understand how to do puzzles really well, but his friends are always doing it. Those friends of this kid with special needs, they are mastering the activity of puzzle making because they're practicing it, they're doing it over and over, but they're also teaching that kid how to do the puzzle as well. So it gives them just different opportunities to teach and to practice their patience and different things like that. So these things are things that we need to know as caregivers about the kids before we should really be taking them into these daycares. So the need to knows go over language, their specific needs, and then accommodations that we should be providing. So things like language, how are they deciding to label things for their family? Some families don't like special needs. Verbiage, some kids don't like disabilities. Verbiage, some families don't want their kids to think that they, not that they're different in any way, but they don't want it to be labeled. And so they choose not to say that their kid has special needs. It's just their kid. And so understanding how they are referring to their own children is something that we should be aware of, so that we're making sure that we're consistent with that. And then their needs, do they need assistance with toileting, moving around, eating? Do they need that little bit of extra attention with transitions? And some of these needs, like, we will be able to figure out on our own as we are interacting with these kids, but toileting and moving around and eating, those are pretty big things that we should be aware of up front. And then the accommodations, how can we meet the child halfway? Where do they excel versus areas that they really struggle? So when it comes to interacting with these kids with special needs, our goal is to treat them as normal as possible. And one of the biggest ways to do that is to recognize, okay, they really, really excel in this area. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to do that thing, but meeting them halfway with the thing that they really struggle at. So if they really struggle with going to the bathroom by themselves, it's being able to recognize, okay, but they can get to the bathroom themselves. So don't necessarily like carry them to the bathroom because they need help with the toileting. And once they get down onto the toilet, if they can do things like wiping themselves, like maybe we turn around and give them that privacy, and then we help them with the standing up and pulling their pants back up, like different things like that. So it's letting them have that independence with that thing that they struggle with, because they excel at parts of that thing as well. So last thing is making inclusion a positive experience. I've talked a lot about some of this stuff already. So it's that creating an environment, physical, emotional, everything, where everyone is invited to participate as much as they want. So that's the things like recognizing that we should be treating them normal, and just because they might not fully understand every activity, they don't need to be excluded from the activity as well. Answer kids' questions with simple, straightforward honesty, and encourage open dialogue about disabilities and abilities among children and parents. So this one's a huge one when it comes to knowledge and creating a society that's inclusive. I feel like I've heard a lot of times when kids have questions, they'll ask their parent like, oh, what's wrong with them? And the parent will just like quiet their kid down. It's like, oh, just ignore them, don't look at them. Like they kind of discourage the question. And instead of just trying to discourage, maybe encourage asking it in a different way. You know, like maybe we ask the kid like, hey, how come you're in a wheelchair? You know, like different things that aren't, excuse me. I inhaled a hair. Wow. Sorry. So instead of discouraging the dialogue, encouraging that dialogue again, just but phrasing it in a different way so it doesn't sound so mean as a what's wrong with them, but encouraging it to sound more like a hey, what's going on? And then help children feel comfortable with each other by helping them develop friendships based on their shared interests. So again, like I've said, just because these kids can't participate in every activity doesn't mean that they can't participate in any activity. So finding the areas where they do feel comfortable and then encouraging the other children to participate with them. So if they really, really like to draw, encouraging art time together. And then we're going to skip that question just because we're running a little behind. But are there any questions or any other comments before we go ahead and stop the recording?